Welcome, everyone. This is Political Ideas and Thoughts. I don't know if I'm going to release this or not, but just some interesting things that may put things in different perspectives. It's all been about here, really, on this channel. Because most people think in terms of the outside world. And when in actuality, it's much more complicated than this. I'm going to give you an interesting, well, not really an interesting, but a really good example of how and why this could be. And a really good example of this. Not saying this is completely accurate or whatever. This is mostly based on my own understandings of how the mind works, how evolution works, how survival works, and how tribalism works, really, because tribalism also involves the mind and psychology. And, most of this is being ignored, especially with this subject I'm being talking about here. So I'm going to be talking about this in a way that you may not have heard or noticed before. A way that you may not have realized existed or is, possibly even more accurate. So, I'm going to give you a really interesting thing to think about here, because this is really what is actually, I think this is like, I don't know if I would say most of the encounters that this involves, but it involves many of these encounters. And it's why systems that are set up in the way that they're set up. And why their systems aren't changing. I might do other videos like this, because this is a really important thing and is so often missed, because people just think and see the outside thing that happened and they go, oh my god, this is so horrible, these people are horrible, the system is horrible, but they don't actually realize why this is happening. So this is going to be probably one of my usual controversial videos, because I'm going to be going at things in a very different way than most people. So this episode is going to be about reinterpreting a lot of ideas, because so many of them are so simplified, right? So general and so vague. And I'm going to be going into what I mean by this. So what we're going to be talking about is police and police brutality, and this idea of defunding the police that has now been happening and going full steam. I'm not really going to be talking about defunding the police as much as I am going to be talking about why I think police brutality and system over protection of the system and overpowering of the system has happened and has been happening. But particularly, I think this has to do with police. Too much force from the police or whatever. And this could be said for anything really. But I'm just gonna give these examples and this understanding to you, because I don't think this is understood by people. I don't think people understand how this and why this happens, because they don't understand themselves. They don't understand how the mind works. And this is the biggest trap right here. This is the biggest problem, is that so many people are focused on their red herrings. And they're right, but they're also, because they're not self-aware, because they're not aware of how the mind works and aware of how their own mind is working, they're focusing so much on this outer event that they're not even realizing that this is causing them to be inaccurate about things and causing a lot of problems. So I'm going to be going into this. So why do I think police brutality happens? Why do I think that there's all this force, too much force that has been pushed, that's happening? Some people would say that it's because of the system that we have or that because all cops are bad, or all these oversimplifying terms that people have about things. But what they don't understand is how the mind and how psychology works, particularly how the mind works. And because they don't understand this, they oversimplify everything, and they think that this is representing reality, when it's a lot more nuanced and more complicated than this. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about here, right? So a lot of these social justice warrior type people think that the reason why police brutality happens, and all this force, the too much force happens, is because police, or the system that the police are involved in, is racist, and it's systemically bad because of racism and all these things. I got a simpler explanation. And I'm not saying that there's no racism there, by the way. I'm just saying that this is more likely the cause, because of the way the mind works. So, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a way of looking at this to sort of paint a picture for you. That you may not have realized existed. And by the way, this mostly happens in big cities. Police brutality. I think like 80. I don't know what the number actually is, but I'm going to guarantee you that at least 80 to 90% of it happens in bigger cities. There's a reason for this, and this is what I'm going to be telling you here. So say you have a police officer every day, right? He's doing his job, or her job, doing the job of creating order and all these things. And throughout the day, you go to places, you get orders to go to areas, and you don't really know all that much about the situation you're getting into. But you're seeing violence, you're seeing people being murdered, you're seeing protesters that sometimes are peaceful, but sometimes are violent. And because they see so much violence and so much murder that happens, I think the main sort of like consequence of this is what is called desensitization, and what is also called there's multiple terms you can call for this. And so because they see this every day, when somebody's pulling something out of their pocket, they don't know what to think. They don't know if it's a gun, if it's a cell phone, whatever it is. And they're not going to sit there and think rationally and think, oh, what is this thing? Is this a phone? Is this a gun? Probably not, especially if the situation is tense. And because of evolution and how the mind works, their automatic reaction is going to be like that. Either they're going to think, either they're going to have that reaction, and it's going to take over them before they can think twice about it, or they're going to have, all this adrenaline, and their rational mind's going to say, well, it doesn't look like it's a gun, or whatever it is. But because that automatic reaction of it's a gun, it's a weapon, whatever it would be, it's so strong because of because of how evolution works. The reaction is going to be like that. There's no pausing there. Now, I'm not saying that I'm justifying people being murdered because they're pulling out a cell phone or anything. No, but I'm saying that this is how evolution works. You're not. I mean, a good example that I like bringing up. I don't really know why I always bring this up, but I get a way of looking at this, right? Is that if you're in the woods and a bear is coming up to you, you're not going to think rationally about it. You're not going to say, oh, well, if a bear is coming up to me, since a bear is coming up to me, I have to do this, and this. No, you're automatically going to have a reaction like that. There's no reason or logic behind why you're doing it. It's adrenaline. So, there's the first, and possibly even one of the most important reasons and understandings here. Not saying that it's right. Not saying that there could be a better solution, or maybe not saying that there could be some kind of way of overcoming this, which would be pretty much impossible given their situation. And I'm not saying that there aren't cases of bad apples that are doing whatever they're doing for whatever malicious reason they have, but these aren't the overwhelming majorities. And so the same is true for protests, right? There could be multiple reasons for why this is happening. One of them is if they see a protest becoming possibly even having a hint of becoming more than what they should be, their reaction is going to possibly be an overreaction. It's not because they're evil. It's because the mind is like, I don't want to be caught in a violent situation. I you're going to have an automatic reaction. There's no reasoning with somebody, especially if their adrenaline is high. When your emotions are strong and high, there's no reasoning with you. There's no somebody coming up to you and saying, "Oh, well, maybe you should think about this, or this." Think about like if somebody were to take a prized possession of yours. Say you have a car or something. You're not gonna listen to somebody who's saying, "Oh, well, maybe the poor person was poor. Maybe he had, a really bad situation that he was in, and he needed the car for some reason." You're probably not going to be like, "Okay, that makes sense." You're probably going to be like, "No, this is really annoying. This is angering me." So you're not going to be thinking rationally about, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." I mean, unless you don't really care about the car, in which case that's a different story. But so this is the problem here, because so many people don't observe themselves. They don't observe their minds. They don't understand how the mind works. They believe that it's maliciousness, that is racism. And because there's so many oversimplified and overgeneralized understandings, like the idea is there's these understandings like all cops are bad, cops kill people. Well, for one, all cops are bad is extremely overgeneralization, and that is really just you're not really telling me anything. I mean, it's like telling me that all cats are, I don't know, females. This is not accurate. Even if there's some reason behind it, because of the words "all cops are bad," you're not getting these reasons. You're not giving us anything but rhetoric. And I understand why this is happening. Your mind is not rationalizing anything. This is what happens when emotions take over the mind. This is why you need to observe your mind. The mind is the biggest enemy that you have. The enemy, for the most part, doesn't come from other people. It doesn't come from the media. It comes from the mind. Your mind, somebody else's mind, the media's mind. I don't care whose it is. It's the mind. That's all it is. That's the cause of the problem. Okay, so the other thing that's causing this is tribalism. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of why and how this happens, right? So say you're in a war with somebody, with a group of a tribe, right? Say you have a group of guys or girls or a group of people that you are trying to defend yourself from these people. Now, I'm not saying that cops are on a war, but because they see these situations and where it might seem like a war or seem like it could be like a war, but because they see this every day, their natural episode, their natural result. The natural result of that is going to be tribalism, because they're going to see that the only people who are really going to defend them is themselves. Because, if you're like I said, like if you're in a war, if you and like 100 other people are in a war with like a tribe of like 20,000 people, you're not going to see those people as, maybe this was caused because of the past. Maybe we should just like try and talk to them. No, you're not going to be talking to these people. Now, I'm not saying that cops necessarily think as seriously as that, but I can almost guarantee you that that's part of it. I can almost guarantee you that's probably even most of it. And maybe not even most of it, but I guarantee you that it's definitely part of it. Because, the mind, a lot of these, like, rational-minded people are like, oh, we need to have people be more rational and think rationally and things like that. It's not how the mind works. It's not how your mind works. We need to have people be emotional and things like that. That's not how your mind works. Don't give me that. If you think your mind works that way, it just means that you don't realize why you're doing certain things that you're doing, and what the actual cause is. Not necessarily why, but the cause itself. I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to point out here, right? So, if you didn't care about, say, let's give me as an example, right? If I didn't care, and if I didn't have an emotional reaction to, or emotional like thing happen when it comes to this subject, and if I didn't care at all, if I had no emotions at all tied to this subject, I would not be making a video about this. I would be, doing something else, watching YouTube videos or something. I would not be making this video right now. And so if a rationalist wouldn't have some kind of emotional response to rationalism, they wouldn't care about rationalism. They would just be doing the normal things. All these skeptical people, they think they're doing what they're doing because of science, but they have made their meanings. They put significance on things, which creates a sort of emotional reaction of sorts. And I'm saying that they are completely out of control and completely emotional in the sense that we understand it, like crying and like being upset, but their emotions are guiding their actions in some ways. I mean, I'm not saying that they can't control it and aren't controlling it, because they obviously are, most of the rational-minded people. But their emotional, like, response and their significance they pay to things and their meaning is what's causing this. There's no rational part of their brain. That's not how the brain works. That's not how the mind works, for the most part. And the same thing is true for, anybody, really. And if you think about it, if you think about it for 5 seconds, you realize this. But that's another subject. So, when a cop is seeing this happen, all these things they're seeing every day, they become, and partly they become desensitized to it. By the way, this is not me saying this because of evidence or anything. This is just my personal theory based on how I know the mind works. Because I've watched the minds. I've watched my mind. I've watched, how people react, and I know why that's happening. People think that when they're reacting, they don't really realize why people are reacting. Because they haven't observed their own minds, so they don't really understand why this is happening. And so when somebody reacts or somebody does something, they're like, oh, this person is dumb, everything like this. Instead of realizing why this is actually happening. The true understanding of why. So a cop is, seeing this every day, and he's seeing that he has other, fellow people that he works with every day who's seeing pretty much the same thing he is. Violence, murder, protests that may or may not become peaceful, looting, things like this. Because he sees this, his probably natural reaction, whatever, is going to be to protect himself and his tribe. There's this saying that says there's a phrase called the thin blue line. I think that's what the thin blue line is. Not saying that I'm not saying that I'm completely accurate or anything, but that's my guess based on how the mind works. I could be wrong. It's fair. But observe your mind during the day. I can almost guarantee you that you're having the actions and reactions based on your understanding. But if you haven't observed your mind for years on end like I have, you wouldn't really be able to see this at first. You wouldn't be able to see it for months, and it possibly even years, because you have been so indoctrinated by your mind. This is not me saying that you're dumb or whatever. I'm not saying that you're stupid for being indoctrinated. No. It's not me doing any of this. Not trying to degrade anybody at all. I'm just stating facts here. You're being indoctrinated, and still are indoctrinated by your mind. Because you haven't observed your mind. You haven't observed what the mind really is and why the mind does what it does. I don't really want to go into all of that. I made plenty of episodes on my podcast, David Speaks, about this. And I might make a separate video about this subject in regards to politics itself. Because it's one of the most insidious things that exist. People say, people are bad people, and we need to fix the system and all this stuff. But what they don't understand is what is actually causing these problems. It's not really the system. I'm not saying that the system isn't bad, or needs to be fixed or whatever. But that's not the main problem here. The main problem is the mind, the minds of the people, the mind of you, and everybody focuses on the outer. Oh, Trump is bad. Trump is good. Trump has said something good. Trump has said something bad. Trump is such an idiot. Trump is, so smart. He's playing 4D chess. All this bullshit. It's keeping you from watching yourself. It's keeping you from realizing what I'm talking about here. The more that you watch yourself, the more that you realize that your mind is uncontrollable most of the time. Not even that it's uncontrollable. It's like a damn monkey that's somehow finds himself in a shop, right? Like a business. And he starts tearing shit apart. Because the monkey doesn't really know better or care. It has likes and wants and needs, and it will think, all these crazy things to get what it wants. And it might even do some of the things that it thinks to get what it wants. Now, depending on who you are, you may be more or less disciplined, but most people's minds are very undisciplined because they're so unaware of their minds. I went completely off topic, but it's not really off topic. It's really what we're talking about here. It's really what politics should be about. It should not be really about what other people are doing. The most, almost the most important part of politics should be observing the mind and understanding psychology. But even psychology doesn't really go deeply into this. because I don't think most of the psychologists observe their own minds to understand what I'm talking about here. They observe other people and all this stuff, and that's fine. You can definitely get some insights by doing that. But if you're not observing your mind, if you're not, seeing what I'm talking about here, you're not really going to, be fixing the problem. Because the biggest problem isn't, other people or, whatever. It's, your mind. It's your mind, it's their mind, whoever's mind. I wanted to make this video, too, about the mind, about the politics, about the true problem with politics. It has nothing to do with people, for the most part. Now, you could argue that people does include the mind, which is fine. But the way most people think of that, the idea of people, they don't consider the fact that your mind itself, the mind itself, not just your mind, is, because it's so insidious and because it's so hard to spot the hypocrisies of the mind, the problems with the mind. They think it's, other people are just, the bad people, the assholes, and all the cops are the racist people. The system is racist. People are racist for doing or saying whatever they're doing or saying. Not saying that they are or aren't. I'm saying that because your mind is as well as other people's mind. It's not really about other people as much as it is about observing yourself. Because you can't really observe other people's minds. I mean, you can try and get like an indirect understanding of how possibly their mind would be working based on their actions and what they're saying to you. But you're not really getting a whole lot from that. You're getting like an indirect view into their minds. The really important thing is to see your mind. And the more that you see into your mind, the more that you are able to observe it, from certain frameworks, the more that you start to realize that the problem isn't other people. Because when people say that Trump is dumb, or when Trump says the media is dumb, that they're enemy of the people, you have all these people who are against whatever. They don't realize why and how the people that they're against are the way they are. And I can be guilty of this as well. I mean, I'm definitely anti-media these days. Most of them are very just Trump bad all the time. There's no reasonable discussions or reasonable understandings and things like this. But at the same time, I understand why that's happening. So, I mean, when you're not observing this within yourself, you're going to be tricked and fooled into believing it's everybody else but you, for the most part. I mean, there'll be times when you'll be like, oh my God, I'm such a bad person, and whatnot. But when you're focused on everybody else and the news and all this stuff, you're not really focused on your mind. And one thing I'm going to say here is that when I say focus on yourself, I don't mean call yourself a bad person or an evil person. I'm talking about observing that within yourself, observing what your mind is doing for days and days on end. Always observe what your mind is doing as much as you can, because the more that you do this, a couple things will happen. You may start to not be as affected by your mind as you were. But you'll start to learn more about the mind, learn more about how your mind works, and so you'll start to realize the traps that your mind has, that you fall into with your mind. it's not gonna be it's not gonna be like a automatic process that's gonna happen. It's gonna take you years to get to this point, and even after years, it still might not be perfect. Because the mind is very sneaky. But it's worth it, honestly. So, anyways, before I go on for like days on end, I'm going to end it here. Just another perspective and understanding about how and why, this is happening. So, anyways, this is Political Ideas and Thoughts, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.